Tonight, the Nolan Wells investigation into the death of a shining star, Nolan Wells, has an altercation witness emerged. A witness that claims she saw an altercation at Horn Island. Good evening. I'm Nancy Grace. This is Crime Stories. I want to thank you for being with us.
A new witness account has emerged in the Nolan Wells investigation. A woman says she was on another boat near Horn Island when she witnessed an altercation involving Nolan. According to her account, the confrontation began with a dispute over Nolan's phone. She says she heard Nolan demanding his phone back and that the confrontation eventually became physical. But there is something about this account that makes it especially interesting, because information describing an alleged altercation involving Nolan had apparently surfaced weeks earlier, and one of the people who discussed that information was Officer Tatum. Tonight, we're going to compare those two accounts and examine what the available evidence actually establishes.
I'm here with a Nolan Xavier Wells update and some more mysterious letters that I'm reading to you. Again, I don't know if these are real, but I think it's important to share them. After others were forced to leave, the last few were trying to help, but they made them leave. Nolan had already taken his last gasps and was gargling blood. His last words were, "No, please, guys, I love you." Key notes: when Nolan yelled, that's when Evan's mom came down. Nolan's body was still warm when they started moving it to be stored. Nolan survived most of the attack. Ultimately, murder was intentional. He yelled, but barely. He saw his moments and memories flash, but his last memory was with his parents after winning a game, and he was happy and he was ready for the next season. Maybe memories was from his last game of his first year of college. Again, I don't know how this letter could possibly know what his last memory was, so again, we have to take it with a grain of salt. Nolan wanted nothing more than to have peace, even when it wasn't always reciprocated in certain instances. Wyatt was a primary aggressor, encouraging booze and drugs and hyping the others up to single out Nolan. Nolan had some sort of fun, but they left earlier than planned due to the boat having some sort of jerk or throttle issue happening while on the island. The boys planned to leave Nolan. He left the girl. He did spend a little time with her there. Wyatt and Warren were jealous, taunting that they would leave him, and made him swim not too far to the boat. They wanted him to swim through the current, dared him to, and Nolan waited for something current to pass and then swam to the boat approximately at 3:45 p.m. Around 4:30, they had already started to head back, took a few convincing photos that Nolan was failure to it, but did anyways. Again, this is very hard to read. I can't confirm any of this, guys. This is all strong on the ledge of allegedly, but again, these letters are out there, so I thought it was important to read it. Again, some of this writing looks like it could be a female because they've hearted a few things. I just want to put this out there. I have forwarded all these letters to Ben Crump and his attorneys just in case there is anything real to this. But again, I'm not accusing anybody of anything. This is just, in my opinion, something that is interesting to share. Secret Service Sam out, Samson for president of the world.
The information you just heard contains some extremely serious allegations, but there is an important distinction we need to make before going any further. These are allegations contained in messages. They are not automatically established facts simply because someone wrote them down or sent them to a commentator. Some of the claims are incredibly specific. They describe what allegedly happened during Nolan's final moments, what people supposedly did afterward, and even what Nolan may have been thinking before he died. But those details have not been independently established from the material we're examining. Even the person reading the messages acknowledged that. So rather than treating those letters as proof of what happened to Nolan, they should be treated as allegations that could potentially be compared against evidence investigators already have. And there is an important difference between an anonymous message claiming knowledge of Nolan's final moments and a person claiming, "I personally saw Nolan." That is where the newer witness account becomes significant. The woman says she was on another boat near Horn Island. She says she witnessed an argument involving Nolan and several other people. She says the argument involved Nolan's phone. According to her account, Nolan was demanding that his phone be returned. She then says the confrontation continued after the group reached shore and became physical. She says a young woman was telling them to stop, but there is one sentence in her account that may be just as important as everything else. She says she left before seeing what happened afterward. That means even if her account is completely accurate, it does not establish what happened to Nolan after she departed. It doesn't establish that he was killed, it doesn't establish who caused his death, and it doesn't establish that the alleged fight caused his death. What it potentially establishes is much narrower. Nolan may have been involved in a confrontation at a particular location and time. And according to the witness, there may be video. The important thing here is what the witness is and is not claiming. She is not saying she watched Nolan die. She is not saying she watched someone push him into the water. She is not saying she witnessed a murder. She's saying she witnessed an argument and what she describes as a physical confrontation before leaving the area. That makes the details surrounding her observation extremely important. Where exactly was her boat? Where was Nolan? Who else could she see? What time was it? How long did she observe the confrontation? And most importantly, does the video she says her husband recorded still exist? Because if that footage exists, the timestamp could become more important than anyone's interpretation of the argument. Investigators could potentially compare that footage against the boat timeline, phone evidence, witness statements, and other information. And the next section is important because it contains the witness's own account of what she says she personally saw.
Not spoken publicly about this before, but I witnessed an altercation involving Nolan Wells from a boat nearby. What I saw has stayed with me, and I believe it's important information. I have provided or intend to provide my account to the appropriate investigators because Nolan's family deserves the truth. Out of respect for the ongoing investigation, I won't speculate beyond what I personally observed. While I was on the boat near the area, I witnessed an altercation involving Nolan Wells and several other individuals. I saw what appeared to be an argument that escalated after there was a dispute involving Nolan's phone. I heard Nolan yelling for his phone to be returned. The argument continued after the group reached shore, and I observed a physical fight involving Nolan and multiple people. I also observed a young woman telling them to stop. At that point, I left the area because the situation had appeared to be getting worse. I did not remain long enough to witness what happened afterward. Everything beyond what I personally observed would be speculation, so I cannot honestly say what occurred after I left. Then she said she messaged one of the individuals that she saw, hey, I just want to say I was a passenger on another boat and I saw the argument between you guys and we'll go to the police with this information. I also have video footage. My husband doesn't show much, but it shows the argument that was taken and how you guys were upset at Nolan because of the young lady.
Now the allegation becomes more specific. The witness says she and her husband saw the confrontation. She says there is video, but that creates an obvious investigative question. Was that video ever provided to investigators? The public may not know. And we should be careful not to confuse the existence of a claimed video with knowledge of what the video actually contains. We don't know its precise timestamp, we don't know the camera angle, we don't know how long it runs, we don't know exactly what is visible, and we don't know whether investigators have reviewed it. Those questions matter. There's another potentially important detail. The witness says the confrontation involved Nolan's phone. If that can be independently established, investigators could potentially compare that information against other evidence concerning Nolan's phone and his movements. But once again, this comes down to verification. And one of the commentators discussing the case immediately focused on exactly that issue, whether the witness had actually taken the information to law enforcement and whether her video could establish a precise timeline.
In the public defender's office, they try a ton of cases. Philip, first of all, has she turned it into police? She said she was. If she hasn't, I give her no credibility at all. Look, I want this to be true. Why? Because I want the video. I want to see the timestamp on the video. I want to see, was he still on Horn Island at 4:30 when his acquaintances on the Triton boat left? I want that video. And if she hasn't brought this forward to LE, law enforcement, then it means nothing to me. I mean, if I know a young man turns up dead in the water, and I know there's a controversy surrounding this, I mean, we know she knows that because she's gone online and posted it, then why not hand it over to police?
Agreed. And it should go to the grand jury for part of their investigation. But I got to tell you, if I were cross-examining her, should this even go to trial, the first question I'd ask her on that 4th of July, what she had been drinking. Before that video got activated, everybody would want to
put him up.
Drinking and smoking. You know how many people were partying?
Okay, man. Have you lost your mind?
That timestamp could ultimately be one of the most important details in this entire allegation, because the central question isn't simply, did Nolan argue with someone? It's, when did the alleged confrontation happen? If the video places Nolan at a particular location at a particular time, investigators can compare that against the accounts of the people who say they left the island. If the timeline matches, that could strengthen the account. If it contradicts the established timeline, that creates another problem. And if the footage shows something different from what the witness remembers, that matters too. This is also where the question about whether the witness had been drinking needs to be handled carefully. Questioning a witness about alcohol consumption does not automatically make the witness unreliable. Investigators may examine anything that could affect perception, memory, or the ability to accurately identify what happened. But drinking alone does not prove that someone's account is false. The evidence has to establish that. And then the discussion turned to Brandon Tatum. His response is where the story takes a much more interesting turn.
Tatum is joining us. So after all that, all you have to say is, was she drinking? That's your takeaway from that? Joining me is Brandon Tatum, former police officer, Tucson, now star of The Officer Tatum on YouTube, who famously has interviewed the acquaintances who all say they had nothing to do with it. Let's just put that out there. He's interviewed them extensively. I want to talk about not what you want to talk about, Brandon Tatum, which is they had nothing to do with this, because I met them and I believe them. So noted. Can we talk about a potential witness to an altercation? And she seems to suggest it was over Katie. Why? Don't know what the altercation was. Maybe it was, hey, leave her alone and get on the boat, or leave her alone, she's my girlfriend, or it could be anything. But if there is a witness placing Nolan seemingly in the water, I can't tell that, but having an argument with another person, a partier at Horn Island, that is significant. It could prove or disprove your friend's timeline.
Well, Nancy, I think that it's a big obstacle to climb here because I've never heard of this altercation whatsoever.
That statement creates the central discrepancy, because the question is no longer simply whether the new witness is credible. The question is whether information describing a similar encounter had already reached Tatum, and according to an earlier video from Tatum's own channel, he had discussed something remarkably similar. Weeks earlier, Tatum described receiving a message from someone who allegedly had information about Nolan. According to Tatum, the message involved someone who had seen Nolan arguing with another person, and there was one particularly important detail. The person allegedly said that they and their husband had seen Nolan arguing. Let's hear exactly what Tatum said at that time.
Your friend's timeline.
Well, Nancy, I think that it's a big obstacle to climb here because I've never heard of this altercation whatsoever. Nobody that I've talked to have alluded that this altercation was real.
Listen to the timing here. Tatum was already discussing information about an alleged encounter involving Nolan and another person. He said the information came from someone who claimed to have seen Nolan arguing. He also said the incident occurred after the other boat had already left. And he went further. At the time, Tatum said he was not convinced Nolan simply drowned. He said somebody knew what happened to Nolan. That does not prove the source was accurate. It doesn't prove a physical altercation occurred. And it certainly does not prove that anyone involved in the alleged confrontation caused Nolan's death. But it does establish that Tatum had previously discussed information that appears similar to the allegation being discussed now. So rather than telling viewers what to think, let's hear the earlier statement for ourselves.
I received a DM from someone DMing another person. Now I'm trying to leave these names out because I want to not mess this investigation up. I think law enforcement already have this. That alluded to the fact that, and I messaged this person because I want to talk directly to the person that I saw the DM from. And we haven't talked to this person yet. But the person said in the DM to another kid that is associated, not any of the kids that I interviewed to talk to, but that could be associated to some degree, that knew Nolan, that this person wrote a message saying, me and my husband saw you arguing with Nolan, and to the effect of you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison. Now, the person did not say they saw a physical altercation. The person did not say what time they saw Nolan and this other person getting into an argument. Now, this is after Warren, their boat left. This may be somewhere around a little bit before 6. What I'm thinking at this point, with all that has been said, is that somebody knows exactly what happened to Nolan, or they saw him right before he died. I am not convinced that Nolan was just out there and drowned.
Now put those two statements side by side. Earlier, Tatum publicly discussed information describing an alleged argument involving Nolan. Later, when asked about the newly surfaced witness account, he said he had never heard about the altercation. On their face, those statements appear difficult to reconcile. But we should still be precise. We cannot establish from these clips alone that both accounts describe exactly the same incident. The earlier message may have referred to a different argument. The timing may have been different. The people involved may have been different. Or the information may have changed as it was passed from one person to another. So the strongest question is not, did Tatum lie? The stronger question is, what exactly did Tatum know? When did he know it? And was the earlier allegation the same event described by the newer witness? And this isn't the only claim Tatum previously made that can be compared against later information. He also made a very confident claim about Nolan's toxicology.
And also Katie, whom I saw her text messages, she didn't even say this altercation occurred. What I will say is that if I was an investigator in this investigation, I want to hear that. I want to be able to compare that information to other things that we may have or other witness statements. But I don't think it's significant because it doesn't show if Nolan Wells was actually killed in that altercation. She's claiming that there was an altercation between him arguing with somebody else. There was a potential fight, but that doesn't get me to how did he drown? How did he get in the water, and how did he not recover and come home to his family? So I would take that into consideration. I would compare that to the other interviews that I've done, but I don't think it's significant whatsoever. However, I would be incredibly skeptical because there's no other statements that I've heard from anybody that comes even close to an altercation with Nolan Wells and others over a girl.
Number one, he's dead shortly after an alleged altercation with another male. We think over a woman. See, in my world, I put together both circumstantial and direct evidence. Direct evidence would be, for instance, DNA or a fingerprint. Circumstantial evidence is the timing of the alleged altercation and his death. Right?
Nancy,
so it's hard for me to believe that there's some kind of altercation on Horn Island just before he dies, and they were not connected. That's hard for me to believe that.
Well, Nancy, she's not saying he lost the fight. She's not saying that he got beat up. If you look at the autopsy, there's no clear signs of blunt force trauma to his face or any of the vital areas that could kill him. So it doesn't appear that there's any indication that he lost a fight, that there was enough trauma in this.
This is where the difference between a source and evidence becomes extremely important. Tatum presented the information with extraordinary confidence. He said his sources were reliable, he said they had been accurate before, and he predicted that Nolan's toxicology would show cocaine. That is a claim that can ultimately be tested. The later discussion on Nancy Grace included reports that cocaine was not found in Nolan's system. But we need to be precise here. The transcript itself describes that information as an uncorroborated report. Unless the official toxicology report is publicly released, we should not present a reported result as a confirmed medical finding. What we can say is that there appears to be a discrepancy between the earlier prediction and the later reported information. And this points to a much bigger issue in the case. There are now several different types of information circulating. There are eyewitness accounts, anonymous messages, alleged videos, statements from people connected to Nolan, statements from commentators, and forensic evidence. Those categories don't carry the same evidentiary weight. A person saying they saw an argument is one thing, a video showing the argument is another. A timestamp establishing where Nolan was is another. An official forensic report is another. And a commentator saying a source told them something is something else entirely. That distinction is critical, because the question isn't which theory sounds most convincing, it's which pieces can actually be independently verified. And that's where the medical evidence becomes important.
But what I was told, and you guys, please take in consideration that it's reliable sources. However, the only way to prove the truth in this is if I see it with my own eyes, if the law enforcement have the investigation of this, and also when the toxicology results come out. But people are messaging me and telling me that there is heavy drinking and there's cocaine involved. And there's a particular person whom I know this person's name. I'm not going to disclose it. I'm going to go to the police first, and then I will disclose it if it doesn't interfere in the investigation. But this person allegedly was offering people cocaine, and someone close to Nolan, one of his friends, told me that this person was offered cocaine and rejected it from this person. And I was also told, and this person told me that it's over 100% chance that Nolan was using cocaine during this period of time. This person said it was 150% sure that when the toxicology comes back, that Nolan will have cocaine in his system.
The medical evidence creates an important boundary. An alleged altercation does not automatically prove that Nolan was killed, and the absence of obvious fatal blunt force trauma does not necessarily establish that no altercation occurred. Those are separate questions. Investigators still have to establish what happened between Nolan's last confirmed movements and the recovery of his body. Who saw him last? What time was it? Where was he? Who was around him? What happened to his phone? When did the boats leave? And does any independent evidence place Nolan somewhere after the people who say they left him had already departed? That's why the alleged witness video could potentially matter, not because it would automatically solve the case, but because a time-stamped recording could be compared against everything else. The same principle applies to Tatum's statements. The important issue isn't whether viewers like him or dislike him, it's whether his public statements can be reconciled with the underlying evidence. And the final source discussion brings us back to what the medical evidence can and cannot tell us.
I know they're saying they're done with the autopsy and that it's complete, which means the gross findings in the autopsy room, the tox, the histology, that means that that autopsy report is complete. They just hadn't released their findings yet.
And speaking of that, Joe Scott Morgan, I've heard the same, that the autopsy is complete.
Yep.
There are reports that there is no cocaine in Nolan's system. That's uncorroborated reports,
Okay.
but a good source. No cocaine in the system.
Yep.
Joe Scott, when the body has been in the elements, such as the water, for that long, how can I confirm if he had been drinking or not?
Oh, you can still pull a BA, blood alcohol, or blood ethanol level, as it's referred to. And again, Nancy, we're not talking about someone that has been down for weeks and weeks.
At this point, several important questions remain. Was there an altercation? Was it recorded? When exactly did it happen? What happened to Nolan's phone? And why do earlier and later accounts of the alleged incident appear different? Those are questions that evidence can potentially answer. Until then, the distinction remains critical. What we know, what has been claimed, and what remains unknown.